Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with a confession. Sometimes it walks through the lobby holding a little girl's hand. The revolving doors of the Hayes Atlantic Hotel turned slowly beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers as Manhattan shimmered beyond the towering glass walls like a sea of gold. Everything inside the five-star hotel carried the scent of perfection. White roses lined the marble staircase. A string quartet rehearsed softly near the ballroom entrance. Staff members moved with measured precision through the grand lobby, preparing for the wedding of the year. William Hayes stood near the concierge desk in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his silver cufflinks catching the warm amber light as photographers waited outside for tomorrow's headlines. At 38, the billionaire CEO looked exactly like the man financial magazines worshipped. Controlled, powerful, untouchable. Yet beneath the polished calm in his gray eyes lived a fatigue no amount of money could erase. "Sir, the Monroe family just arrived," his assistant whispered carefully. William adjusted his watch without looking up. "Give me 5 minutes." His voice remained smooth, practiced, almost cold. The assistant nodded and disappeared into the crowd. William exhaled slowly as his gaze drifted toward the towering windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. Snow had started falling over Manhattan, soft and quiet against the city lights. Tomorrow he would marry Claire Monroe in front of governors, celebrities, and business leaders. The merger between their families would dominate every newspaper in America by sunrise. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing inside a beautifully decorated cage. Then he heard it. A child's voice. Small, gentle, certain. "Mommy, that's him." William turned instinctively. Near the lobby entrance stood a little girl no older than 5, bundled in a cream-colored winter coat, with tiny snowflakes melting in her dark curls. Her deep brown eyes remained fixed on him with unsettling recognition. Beside her stood a woman wearing the navy uniform of the hotel's night management staff, frozen completely still as though the world had suddenly stopped. Breathing. William's chest tightened before his mind could understand why. The woman lowered her eyes for half a second, and the movement alone shattered 6 years of silence inside him. Maya Bennett. Time folded inward with brutal precision. The charity gala in Chicago. Her soft laughter beneath golden lights. The way she listened instead of performing for power. The one night he had spent feeling seen instead of admired. She looked different now. Stronger. Her dark skin glowed beneath the lobby lights with quiet elegance, and exhaustion rested faintly beneath her beautiful eyes. But the dignity he remembered remained untouched. The little girl slipped free from Maya's hand and walked directly toward him across the marble floor. Every conversation in the lobby seemed to dissolve into silence as she stopped inches away from William's polished shoes and lifted a small photograph in her mitten-covered hand. It was old and slightly folded at the corners. A younger version of William stood smiling beside Maya beneath warm summer lights. The little girl looked up at him innocently. "Mom said you didn't know about me," she whispered softly. "But you're my daddy, right?" The silence that followed seemed to swallow the entire lobby whole. Even the violinists near the ballroom entrance had stopped playing. William stared at the little girl as though the ground beneath him had shifted without warning. Her small hand still held the photograph carefully, almost protectively, while snowflakes melted against the sleeves of her winter coat. There was something unbearable in her eyes. Not fear, not confusion. Trust. The kind of trust only children carried before the world taught them disappointment. William lowered himself slowly to one knee, his polished shoes reflecting against the marble floor. Up close, he could see details that made his pulse falter. The shape of her eyes, the faint dimple near her cheek when she spoke. Fragments of himself mirrored back through a child he had never known existed. "What is your name?" he asked quietly, his voice no longer carrying the steel executives feared in boardrooms. "Grace Bennett," she answered softly. "I am 5.5. Maya finally stepped forward, her expression composed despite the tension trembling beneath it. "Grace," she said gently, "why do not you wait by the Christmas tree for a minute, sweetheart?" The little girl hesitated before nodding obediently. She gave William one last hopeful look and walked toward the enormous silver tree glowing beneath thousands of white lights in the center of the lobby. William rose slowly to his feet. For several seconds, neither he nor Maya spoke. The years between them stretched heavily through the polished silence. Maya held herself with quiet dignity, both hands clasped lightly in front of her navy blazer as though refusing to let old wounds reopen in public. William remembered those hands differently, holding coffee during sunrise in Chicago, turning pages during their late-night conversations, resting against his chest while rain touched the windows of his penthouse 6 years ago. "You disappeared," he finally said, barely above a whisper. Maya looked down briefly before meeting his eyes again. "I thought that was what you wanted." The sentence landed harder than accusation ever could. Before William could respond, the ballroom doors opened behind him in a burst of golden light and elegant laughter. Claire Monroe descended the staircase in a silk ivory gown meant for tomorrow's rehearsal dinner, diamonds glittering against her pale skin as reporters immediately lifted cameras near the entrance. But Claire stopped the moment she noticed Maya. Her polished smile froze almost invisibly. Then her gaze shifted toward Grace, standing near the Christmas tree. Sharp calculation flickered across her face before disappearing beneath practiced elegance. "William," Claire said sweetly as she approached, slipping her hand around his arm. "Everyone is waiting upstairs." William did not move. Claire sensed it instantly. Her eyes narrowed just slightly before settling on Maya's hotel badge. "I did not realize staff members were allowed in the main lobby during private family events," she said smoothly. Maya remained calm. "I was finishing inventory for the ballroom level." Claire smiled, but the warmth never reached her eyes. "Of course." Then Grace turned around holding the old photograph against her chest. "Mommy," she called innocently. "Is this the man from your picture box?" Claire's fingers tightened around William's arm. And for the first time that evening, William saw something crack beneath her perfect composure. Fear. Claire Monroe had spent years mastering the art of appearing untouchable. Society magazines called her graceful. Investors called her intelligent. Her father called her the future of the Monroe Empire. But standing beneath the chandeliers of the Hayes Atlantic Hotel, while a little girl held an old photograph of William Hayes, Claire felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Uncertainty. The photographers near the ballroom entrance sensed the shift immediately. Their cameras lowered slightly. Wealthy guests pretended not to stare while staring anyway. Manhattan's elite had built entire lives around secrets, and everyone in the lobby suddenly understood one thing. Something was wrong. Claire recovered first. She always did. Her smile returned carefully as she released William's arm with elegant control. "What a sweet child," she said softly, approaching Grace with measured warmth. "Where did you find that picture, honey?" Grace looked toward Maya before answering honestly. "Mommy keeps it in a wooden box beside her bed." The innocence in the child's voice cut through the lobby sharper than accusation. William turned toward Maya slowly. "You kept that picture?" Maya crossed her arms lightly, not defensively but protectively, as though shielding years she had survived alone. "It was the only photograph Grace had of you." The sentence hollowed the air between them. William remembered the picture instantly. Chicago. Summer rain against rooftop windows. Maya laughing because his expensive suit jacket had gotten soaked while they walked back from the gala. He had not realized someone had taken the photo until it arrived in the charity newsletter months later. 6 years. 6 years of board meetings, mergers, magazine covers, and private emptiness, while somewhere in the same country Maya had been raising his daughter alone. "William," Claire interrupted gently, "perhaps this conversation should happen privately." But William barely heard her. His eyes remained fixed on Grace, who now stood quietly beside the glowing Christmas tree with snowflakes still melting in her curls. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked Maya. Her expression did not harden. Somehow that made it worse. "I tried." William's jaw tightened faintly. Maya reached into the pocket of her blazer and removed a worn envelope, its edges softened by time. 3 letters, she said quietly. 2 emails. 1 voicemail left with your assistant. William stared at the envelope without touching it. "I never received any of them." Maya gave a small nod, almost as though she had expected that answer years ago. Then Claire spoke again, too quickly this time. "There are plenty of people who would benefit from creating confusion before a wedding like this." The implication settled coldly across the marble floor. Grace looked up immediately. "Mommy does not lie," she whispered. The child's voice was small, but the conviction inside it silenced the room again. William looked toward Claire for the first time since Grace appeared. Something subtle shifted behind his gray eyes. A memory. 6 years ago. Chicago. The morning Maya vanished. Claire arriving unexpectedly at his penthouse with coffee in one hand and concern in her voice. That girl left early, she had told him casually. She said she understood this could never mean anything serious. At the time, he believed her. Standing in the hotel lobby now, with Grace clutching the old photograph beneath white Christmas lights, William felt the first crack appear in the version of the past he had trusted for years. Snow continued drifting past the towering windows of the Hayes Atlantic Hotel, while tension settled over the lobby like invisible smoke. Guests no longer pretended not to watch. Whispers moved quietly beneath the chandelier light as William stood motionless, the unopened envelope still resting in Maya's hand between them like evidence from another lifetime. Claire's composure remained elegant on the surface, but William knew her well enough now to recognize the warning signs beneath it. The slight stiffness in her shoulders. The controlled smile that appeared whenever she felt cornered. "This is not the place for emotional accusations," Claire said carefully, lowering her voice for the nearby guests while maintaining her polished image. Tomorrow is already under enough public pressure. Maya did not react to the insult hidden beneath the word emotional. She simply looked tired. Not weak. Not ashamed. Just tired in the way people became after carrying too much alone for too many years. "I did not come here to ruin your wedding," she replied quietly. "I was working my shift." William's eyes shifted toward her hotel badge again. Night operations manager. The realization struck him strangely hard. 6 years ago, Maya Bennett had been finishing medical school with honors while volunteering weekends at free clinics in Chicago. He remembered the way she spoke about becoming a pediatric surgeon someday, her eyes lighting up whenever she talked about helping children who could not afford care. "You work here?" he asked before he could stop himself. Maya nodded once. 3 nights a week. Something inside William tightened painfully. What happened to med school? Maya hesitated just long enough to answer everything without words. Grace answered for her instead. "Mommy says dreams can wait when somebody needs you more." The child's voice floated softly through the silence, innocent and devastating all at once. William looked toward Grace, standing beneath the Christmas lights, and felt guilt settle heavily against his ribs for a life he never even knew existed. He imagined Maya alone at doctor appointments, alone during sleepless nights, alone while teaching their daughter how to walk, how to speak, how to survive. And somewhere inside all those years, she had still kept his photograph. Claire stepped closer again, this time lowering her voice enough that only William could hear. "You are letting sentiment cloud your judgment." William did not answer immediately. Instead, he extended his hand toward the envelope Maya still carried. She studied him for a moment before finally placing it into his palm. The paper felt worn with time, carefully preserved, not weaponized. William opened the first letter slowly. The date at the top made his stomach sink. 5 years ago. The handwriting was unmistakably Maya's. Elegant, careful, honest. "William, I do not know if this message will ever reach you, but you deserve to know you have a daughter. Her name is Grace. She has your eyes." His breathing slowed. Around him, the luxury hotel suddenly felt unbearably quiet. He turned to the second letter, returned unopened. The third carried the same mark in black ink. Sender rejected by office administration. William lifted his gaze toward Claire with growing disbelief. Claire's face remained calm for one dangerous second too long. Then Grace walked back toward William, holding a small silver snowflake ornament from the Christmas tree. "Mommy says Christmas is when people tell the truth," she whispered gently. "So are you really my dad?" And standing beneath the golden lights of the hotel built in his family's name, William Hayes realized the most important question of his life had arrived from the smallest voice in the room. Grace's question lingered beneath the chandelier light with heartbreaking innocence. Around them, the wealthy guests who had once been focused on champagne towers and wedding rehearsals now stood frozen in complete silence. No one moved. No one even reached for their phones anymore. The atmosphere had shifted beyond gossip into something heavier. Truth had entered the room, and truth demanded witnesses. William looked down at the little girl standing before him, her tiny fingers wrapped carefully around the silver snowflake ornament. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation. He had faced hostile boards, economic crashes, and ruthless competitors. Yet nothing in his life had prepared him for the fragile hope in Grace Bennett's eyes. Slowly, Almost reverently, William lowered himself again until he was eye level with her. I did not know about you, he admitted quietly. But if what your mommy says is true, then yes. I am your father. Grace blinked once as though trying to understand whether joy was safe to believe in. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. The gesture was simple, pure. William closed his eyes the moment he felt her against him, and something inside the carefully guarded walls of his life cracked open completely. Maya looked away briefly, emotion flickering across her face before she regained control. She had not come for revenge. That became painfully clear now. If she wanted destruction, she could have chosen cameras, lawsuits, interviews. Instead, she had chosen silence for 6 years. Claire's voice cut through the moment like cold glass. William, this is becoming inappropriate. He stood slowly with Grace still holding his hand. Inappropriate. His tone remained calm, but the softness was gone now. Claire folded her arms carefully. You are making emotional decisions in front of investors, board members, and the press. No, William replied evenly. I think emotional decisions were made 6 years ago. Claire's expression tightened almost invisibly. Maya stepped forward before the situation could escalate further. Grace and I should leave. William turned immediately. No, the single word surprised everyone, including himself. He looked toward Maya with growing regret shadowing his features. Please do not walk away again before we actually talk. Maya studied him quietly beneath the warm hotel lights. William, tomorrow is your wedding. I am aware of that. His answer carried a weight that unsettled Claire instantly. Near the ballroom staircase, several members of the Monroe family exchanged nervous glances. The string quartet had quietly stopped rehearsing altogether now, their unfinished melody hanging awkwardly in the air. Grace tugged gently on William's sleeve. Mommy cries when she thinks I am asleep, she whispered softly. Maya closed her eyes for half a second. William's chest tightened painfully. Grace, Maya said gently, embarrassed by the honesty only children could offer. But Grace continued innocently. She says some people only love you when life is easy. William looked toward Maya again, really looked at her for the first time beyond memory and shock. He noticed the faint exhaustion beneath her eyes. The older winter coat she probably bought for practicality instead of style. The strength in the way. She carried herself despite years of disappointment. 6 years ago she had walked away believing she was unwanted. And somehow, despite everything, she had still raised their daughter with kindness instead of bitterness. William reached slowly into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and removed the platinum wedding band prepared for tomorrow's ceremony. The diamond reflected sharply beneath the crystal lights before he closed his hand around it again. Then he looked directly at Claire. I think we need to postpone the wedding. The words settled over the lobby with the quiet force of an avalanche. For several seconds, nobody breathed. The crystal chandeliers above seemed too bright now, exposing every crack beneath the polished perfection of the evening. Claire stared at William as though she no longer recognized the man standing in front of her. Postpone, she repeated softly, but the softness in her voice had turned razor thin. You cannot be serious. William held Grace's hand carefully, almost instinctively protective now. A child appeared in my life tonight, Claire. My child. Claire let out a small laugh that carried no warmth. Based on what? An old photograph and emotional storytelling. Maya's expression remained composed despite the humiliation unfolding publicly around her. Grace and I do not need anything from you, she said quietly to William. I never came here asking for your money or your name. Then why keep this from me for 6 years? Claire snapped before William could answer. The edge in her voice finally slipped free. Why wait until the night before the wedding? Grace flinched slightly at the sudden sharpness. William noticed immediately. His gaze hardened. Enough, Claire. The firmness in his tone startled even the nearby guests. Claire crossed her arms tightly, diamonds shimmering coldly against the ballroom lights. You are throwing away everything for a stranger who walks in here with a child and a story. She is not a stranger. William's answer came quietly this time, but somehow it carried even more weight. His eyes shifted toward Maya again. Not to me. The silence that followed felt deeply personal, as though the entire luxury hotel had faded around them. Maya lowered her gaze briefly, emotion flickering through her controlled expression before disappearing again beneath dignity. William suddenly remembered details he had buried under years of ambition. Maya studying medical textbooks beside his penthouse windows while the city slept. Maya laughing softly over takeout coffee at 2 in the morning. Maya telling him that children deserved honesty because the world already gave them enough disappointment. He had forgotten nothing. He had only convinced himself he had. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice urgently. William, think carefully. Investors are upstairs. The press arrives at 8 tomorrow morning. Families flew in from London for this wedding. William looked around the glittering lobby slowly. The marble floors. The floral arrangements worth thousands of dollars. The orchestra waiting beside unopened champagne. For the first time in years, the world he built felt strangely empty. Then Grace tugged gently on his hand again. Are weddings supposed to make people sad? She asked innocently. Maya immediately knelt beside her daughter. Grace, sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. But William heard the exhaustion beneath her calm voice. Years of carrying pain quietly, so her daughter would never inherit bitterness. He admired her for it more than she probably knew. A hotel manager approached nervously from the concierge desk. Mr. Hayes, he whispered carefully. The board members are asking if the rehearsal dinner should proceed. William looked toward the grand ballroom entrance where golden light spilled across the marble floor like another version of the future waiting for him to step inside. Then he looked down at Grace beside the glowing Christmas tree. His daughter, a little girl who had entered his life carrying nothing except honesty. William removed the platinum wedding band from his pocket once more and placed it silently onto the concierge desk beside him. The sound of metal touching marble echoed softly through the lobby. Cancel the rehearsal dinner, he said calmly. Claire's face went pale beneath the chandelier light. William, but he was already looking at Maya. I owe you 6 years, he said quietly, and I do not think I can spend another night pretending none of this matters. The ballroom lights dimmed one by one as staff quietly began clearing untouched champagne glasses and carefully arranged centerpieces that no longer belonged to a celebration. Outside the towering windows of the Hayes Atlantic Hotel, snow continued falling over Manhattan in soft silver waves, covering the city in a silence that felt strangely sacred. Inside the private executive lounge on the top floor, William sat across from Maya for the first time in 6 years without cameras, board members, or expectations standing between them. Grace slept peacefully on the velvet sofa nearby, curled beneath one of William's suit jackets with the silver snowflake ornament still resting in her small hand. The sight alone made something ache inside his chest. Maya wrapped both hands around a cup of untouched tea while the skyline glowed behind her like distant stars. She looked exhausted now that the strength required for the lobby had faded. Not broken, just worn thin by years of surviving quietly. William loosened the collar of his tuxedo slowly, the image of the canceled wedding still lingering like smoke around him. You should hate me, he admitted softly. Maya gave a faint, tired smile that carried more sadness than anger. I tried once. The honesty in her voice hurt more than accusation ever could. William lowered his eyes briefly. Why did you stop? Maya looked toward Grace, sleeping peacefully across the room. Because I had someone watching me every day. William followed her gaze. Grace's tiny curls rested against the dark fabric of his jacket, while snow reflected softly against the glass behind her. Maya's voice grew quieter. Children learn love by watching the people who raise them. I did not want her to grow up carrying bitterness that was never hers to carry. William swallowed hard. 6 years. 6 years of parent-teacher meetings he never attended. Birthdays he never celebrated. Fevers he never stayed awake through. Tell me everything, he whispered. Maya hesitated before speaking carefully, almost protectively, as though preserving Grace's dignity even now. When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to reach you. After the letters came back unopened, I understood what Claire wanted me to believe. William's jaw tightened faintly at the mention of Claire's name. Maya continued calmly. I thought maybe you regretted that night in Chicago. Maybe you had already chosen your future. William looked at her immediately. I never regretted you. The words escaped before pride could stop them. Maya's eyes flickered with emotion before settling back into composure. That would have mattered 6 years ago. The sentence settled heavily between them. Not cruel, just true. William leaned back slowly, staring out at the snow-covered city below. For years he had built his life around control. Every contract negotiated. Every risk calculated. Yet the most important part of his life had unfolded beyond his reach because he trusted the wrong voice and never questioned silence. Grace stirred softly on the sofa. Half asleep, she murmured one word into the quiet room. "Daddy." William froze completely. Maya looked toward him as the little girl drifted back into sleep beneath the warm glow of the executive lounge lamps. Something fragile passed across William's face then. Wonder, grief, love arriving all at once. He stood slowly and walked toward the sofa with careful steps, as though approaching something sacred. Gently, he adjusted the jacket around Grace's shoulders before kneeling beside her sleeping form. His fingers brushed lightly against her curls, and his eyes closed briefly at the simple miracle of touching his daughter for the very first time. Behind him, Maya watched silently while snow continued falling across Manhattan like the city itself was trying to soften the pain of lost years. Morning arrived quietly over Manhattan, washing the city in pale winter light as headlines about the canceled Hayes Monroe wedding began spreading across social media and financial news channels. Yet inside the executive penthouse suite above the hotel, none of that seemed to matter anymore. Grace sat cross-legged near the floor-to-ceiling windows wearing one of the hotel's oversized white robes like a tiny blanket, coloring carefully in a notebook William's assistant had brought her before sunrise. Maya stood near the coffee station in borrowed silence, watching snow melt slowly against the glass while exhaustion weighed beneath her calm expression. She had not slept. Neither had William. He stood near the dining table reading through the final unopened letter Maya had written years ago. The paper trembled slightly in his hand by the time he reached the last line. "I will never force someone to love us, but I pray one day Grace grows up knowing her father was more than silence." William closed his eyes briefly. Every sentence felt like another year stolen from them both. A soft knock interrupted the stillness. Before anyone answered, Claire entered the suite dressed in an immaculate cream coat with dark sunglasses hiding most of her expression. Two members of the Hayes legal team followed behind her uncertainly. Grace looked up from her coloring book immediately. "Is she the lady from downstairs?" Maya gently touched her daughter's shoulder. "Keep coloring, sweetheart." Claire removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes shadowed by a sleepless night. She looked at William first. "The board is panicking." William folded the letter carefully. "That is not my priority right now." Claire laughed softly, but the sound carried exhaustion instead of elegance this time. "No, apparently not." For a moment, nobody spoke. Snow drifted silently beyond the windows while Manhattan continued rushing beneath them, unaware that entire lives had shifted overnight inside this quiet room. Then Claire looked toward Maya. "I did not think you would actually come back." Maya met her gaze evenly. "I never planned to." Claire swallowed once before speaking again. "I was afraid of losing him." The confession settled unexpectedly into the room. William stared at her in disbelief while Maya remained still. Claire's composure cracked quietly now, not dramatically, just honestly. "When William met you in Chicago, I saw something change in him. He smiled differently when he talked about you." She lowered her eyes briefly. "I knew if the two of you stayed connected, I would always come second." William's jaw tightened. "So you intercepted her letters?" Claire nodded once, shame finally replacing pride. "At first I told myself it was temporary. Then years passed, and I could not undo it anymore." Maya looked away toward the windows, pain flickering silently across her face. Not because she still wanted revenge, but because hearing the truth aloud somehow made the lost years feel even more real. Grace suddenly walked across the room, holding up her drawing proudly. "Look," she whispered happily. Crayon figures stood beneath a giant snowflake tree. One tall man, one woman, one little girl between them holding both hands. William stared at the drawing as emotion tightened his chest again. "That is us," Grace explained softly. Claire looked at the picture for several long seconds before her shoulders slowly lowered in surrender. Then she reached into her designer handbag and removed a small stack of unopened envelopes bound carefully together with a faded gold ribbon. Maya's letters, preserved all these years like hidden evidence of another future. Claire placed them quietly on the table beside William. "She never stopped trying to find you," she whispered. And standing there beneath the pale winter light, William realized the greatest betrayal in his life had not been infidelity or business deception. It had been stolen time. 3 months later, spring sunlight poured across the rooftop garden of the Hayes Atlantic Hotel, replacing the winter silence that had once wrapped the building in sorrow. Manhattan shimmered beneath clear blue skies, while white orchids swayed gently in the warm afternoon breeze. There were no reporters gathered outside the gates this time. No political families. No orchestra waiting beside towers of champagne. Only a quiet gathering of people who mattered. Maya stood near the garden railing in a soft blue dress that moved gently with the wind, her dark curls catching the sunlight as Grace spun happily across the rooftop, holding a ribbon wand almost as tall as she was. Laughter echoed softly through the air, light and unforced. Real. William watched them both from a short distance away, something peaceful finally settling into the sharp edges that ambition had carved into him for years. His life still carried wealth, meetings, responsibilities, and headlines, but none of those things felt larger any more than the little girl now racing toward him with untied shoelaces and paint on her fingertips. "Daddy, look what I made." Grace lifted a handmade card proudly toward him. Crayon stars surrounded 3 uneven stick figures beneath the words "My family" written carefully in bright purple letters. William smiled before emotion could stop him. "This might be the best thing anyone has ever given me." Grace beamed as though his answer alone could light the entire city. Nearby, Maya watched quietly while a familiar warmth softened her guarded expression. Healing had not arrived all at once. It came through small moments instead. William attending Grace's school recital despite canceling a shareholders' dinner. Late-night conversations with Maya that no longer carried anger, only honesty. Medical school applications quietly resubmitted after William discovered she had once abandoned her dream to survive. He had offered money at first. Maya refused it immediately, so he learned something harder instead. Presence. Consistency. Patience. "You are staring again," Maya teased softly as William approached beside her. He slipped his hands into his pockets with a quiet smile. "I missed 6 years. I am trying not to miss anything else." The sincerity in his voice still surprised her sometimes. Below them, the city moved endlessly through noise and ambition, but up here the world felt strangely calm. Grace suddenly grabbed both their hands at once, pulling them toward the rooftop garden lights that glowed softly beneath the afternoon sun. "Come on," she laughed. "Families are supposed to stand together for pictures." William and Maya exchanged a brief look filled with everything words still struggled to hold. Regret. Forgiveness. Second chances earned slowly instead of promised quickly. Then they stepped forward together beside their daughter while the skyline stretched endlessly behind them. The photographer lifted the camera carefully. Grace smiled brightest of all, and as the shutter captured the moment forever, William finally understood something success had never taught him before. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life arrive quietly, carrying little snowflakes, old photographs, and the courage to tell the truth.